Welcome to the Palmetto Championship. And it's a week before the U.S. Open. We are Joel. We are Sia. This is the Win Daily PGA live stream. Joel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm excited for another week. This week is going to be interesting, to say the least. It's not your typical field by any stretch of the imagination, which just means that we're going to have more fun today breaking it down for you guys.
You know what I was thinking of today? This Brooks v. Bryson thing, which is going to play into like what we're going to talk about right from the jump, because obviously there's the narrative out there that Brooks doesn't get up for the majors. He certainly doesn't get up for tournaments that are a week before the major, you know, all this stuff, all this kind of narrative based stuff, which might be correct and might be like really dumb. I'm not sure which side to fall on. I know what take I'm going to have, so stay tuned for that. But I love this. And I love how like it feels like they're motivating each other. And that's part of the reason, you know, spoiler alert, that's part of the reason I actually like Brooks this week. But with all of that said, it feels like almost like it's like a movie script. Like the PGA is like knocking them out of the park. They got Phil Mickelson winning a major. They've got, you know, Hideki, you know, winning one for Japan. Like there's so much, like Jordan Spieth is back. And it just seemed like movie script-ish. And somebody asked me what my top 3 movies were yesterday. And I'm like, I want to ask Joel. So before we even talk about this tournament at all, Joel, what comes to mind? I say, maybe you don't have 3, maybe you have 2, maybe you have 1. I'm going to ask you, what are your top 3 favorite movies? Like you can pop them in anytime. You're like, man, this movie's awesome. I love it.
That's a loaded question. It's hard to narrow down, you know, your top 3, but I have 3 that, you know, typically come to mind when we think of favorite movies. The first for me is an easy one, and it's Remember the Titans. As like a kid growing up, was obsessed with that movie. I watched it so many times. I think I watched it so many times, like I don't really watch it much now just because I've outdone it. Like I can probably recite the entire movie line for line. So love me some Remember the Titans. 2, I'd have to go with probably Wedding Crashers. It's definitely my most quoted movie. You know, every opportunity I get, you know, I'm yelling at somebody, make me a bicycle clown or something along those lines. So definitely put that in the mix. And then at number 3, you know, I don't think I can make a commitment to number 3. There's too many. I think I'm gonna have to stick with 2.
That's fair. It's funny. So I have 3 that come to mind. And it's funny because one of them I can literally recite the final scene. I mean, I love the movie so much. So let me start with the other 2 first. So White Men Can't Jump, I think, is amazing. I'm dating myself a little bit. You know, I was in high school in the mid 90s, early 90s when that came out. I love that movie and it's timeless. So for those of you that are a little younger than me, check that movie out. Let's see. Number 2 is Any Given Sunday. We're going to stick with the sports theme. I absolutely love that movie. Love Jamie Foxx. Think he's an extremely talented musician and actor. I got to play basketball with him down here in South Florida about like 10 years ago. Super fun, super nice guy. Couldn't be more humble.
Is he good?
He is pretty good. He stays around the 3-point line, but his shot is good. And, you know, he drilled a few. I was fortunate enough to be his teammate for a few games in a row, on a couple days in a row, actually. Super, super nice guy. The 3rd movie is A Few Good Men. That's the one I can literally recite the final scene, that whole, like, you can't handle the truth part. And Jack Nicholson's like Colonel Jessup's sort of like diatribe that he goes into. I got that one down. That kind of spurred me towards law school. So, you know, maybe later in the show, I'll go off on a tangent and I'll just recite that final scene for everybody. If I get enough people in the chat that want me to do that, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Cause I don't think people believe me that I can do that. For those of you in the chat, by the way, S-Guy's already here. Ivan's already here. Go ahead and throw your favorite movies in the chat, man. I'm kind of curious whether it's your top movie or your top 3. I mean, let's hear that.
While they're doing that, I'll throw in my third. My third, it's an out of left field one, but I love The Lion King, the OG, the cartoon. Great film, great soundtrack. I think it's just very underrated, and I'm really excited that, you know, my son's getting old enough where now it's like normal for me to have to watch it again. So I'm watching a cartoon.
The Lion King is fantastic. I think as far as those like staple Disney movies, when really Disney put themselves on the sort of the animation map, I think Aladdin and Lion King are awesome movies. Well written, well produced. Just ahead of their times, really, in a lot of different ways. So I love those movies. Oh, I'm glad I asked you that question. All right. See, you know, we gotta start every show, I think, with like just some random question. You know, we'll see what happens. Get to know the people listening, and we'll get to know each other a little bit more. So Speaking of getting to know people, wow, look at this roster of players at the Palmetto Championship. I mean, we're at Congaree. It's a brand new course. It's this was supposed to be in Canada. It's the second year in a row that Canada has declined because of, COVID issues, that they are going to pass on holding their tournament. So we're in South Carolina, and it's a pretty unknown course. There's a handful of players that have played on this course, like your Lucas Glovers and your Kevin Kisners and, a handful of other players. And, it's a long course. Whether it plays long is a different question, but we certainly don't have the answers to those questions right now. I mean, it's a par 71. I think it's almost 7,600 yards. Sounds to me like being long is definitely going to be a benefit here, but as usual, it's not imperative to be long. I know I'm looking, Joel, at the off the tee game more than I normally do. I'm looking at the longer iron shots, those longer proximities, 175, 200 plus. Now, I'm not only looking at those. I'm looking at the entire approach, of course, but I'm also looking at those longer proximities. And I think these are going to be tricky and fast greens. I actually think putting is really important here. Now, anybody can get hot with a putter, so you got to be careful with that. But I do think having a, quote, confident putter is really going to help you this week, because just landing it on the green isn't necessarily going to get you super far. So you got to be able to putt. You got to 3-putt avoid, Joel. I know you always factor that into your models. So I think putting is going to take not center stage, but it's going to certainly be in the picture more than it normally is. So, Joel, with that said, before we get into this top tier, which is only 4 players deep, deservedly so, because this isn't a talent-ridden field, anything else about the course you wanted to add in, or do you want to just jump to the players?
Yeah, the only thing is, obviously there's not a lot to go off of from previous experience. It's a relatively new course, especially doing the tour. So there are a few guys that have played there, but for the most part, what I've been reading is that they struggled and that it was really hard. So I don't want to play. I don't want to go after them, right? Because there wasn't like they're going in there and shooting really low, except for Luke List. But what I did see is that it's really long, like Sia said, and there's a lot of really long holes. So if you can factor that into your models of, some of the longer par 4s and things like that, some of the longer par 3s, those are the guys this week that we should be looking at. Yeah,
and there are some bare of par 4s. There's a par 5 that's like 600 and change. So the long game is certainly going to benefit you. But again, this course is going to play pretty fast. So unless there's like heavy rain, you probably will be able to get it there, even if you're a shorter hitter, easier than people think, which is why I suppose guys like Kevin Kisner are in play, which frankly, he's not going to be on my list of players, but just something to think about. We got a couple responses. So I'm going to ask you about who you like in the top 4, but Ivan, Friday Night Lights, Kung Fu Panda. Jack Black. Interesting. Star Wars Episode 5. And then Logan pipes in with greatest game ever played, Gem of a Golf Movie. I have not seen that movie, and we're doing a golf show, so I feel compelled to catch up. So thanks for the advice there, Logan. And then I think I flashed Ivan. Remember the Titans' great choice. Compliments to Draftmaster Flex there. By the way, we have some free content already on WinDailySports.com. My article, I'm pretty sure every week is free. So it's my initial picks article. Those do kind of grow and get culled as the week goes. And what I really mean by that is, as tomorrow goes and we get in Discord and we have our chats. But for the most part, I stick with my initial picks. So it's definitely a good starting point. Go to WinDailySports.com. You should be able to read that. You might have to do a username password. I'm not really sure, but it's super easy to get access to all of that free content. Obviously, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a ton of free content across all sports. We do shows every day other than this week. John Jansen's taking the week off, but John Jansen, Mike North, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. They do betting picks every single day. And then we have Tony Cotillo covering the weekend. So make sure you subscribe to the Apple Podcasts and to the YouTube channel. Joel, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Terrell Hatton. I think it's safe to say you can make arguments for all 4 of these guys. But, I mean, maybe you want to give me your order. Maybe you just want to give me a couple guys that you like. Where are you at here?
So what I find to be interesting this week is the top tier, more so it's obviously the opposite of what we were saying last week and the week before, when we were like, there's not much of a difference in the top tier and the next tier. You might as well start the next tier because, you're just getting the salary savings and these guys are all just as good. Not the case this week. Right now, I'm saying the top tier is head and shoulders above the rest of the field. And I almost think they're mispriced. Even though they're still the most expensive, I think they should even be more expensive because it feels like we have a bunch of all-stars playing in a JV game. So with that being said, DJ, I know he's not been in his best form. This is still the number 1 golfer in the world. playing it feels like in a JV game, where the course actually, with the distance and everything like that, suits him, right? This should be like, even with all the main guys, this should be a course that suits him well. So if you have a course that suits the best golfer in the world well, not playing against the top competition, I feel like he could be priced at $15,000 this week, and I would have been like, that's fair price. So at this price, I love DJ. And one of my cardinal rules with playing DFS is that you never want to overexpose yourself to someone, because you never know what could happen. This could happen. They could tee off at 9 a.m. or at 7 a.m. and then DJ could withdraw and prepare for the tournament next week, and then you're just stuck with all this exposure that you can't get out. But I'm going to roll the dice, and I'm going with it, and I think I'm going to go all in on DJ. I think every lineup that I put out is going to have DJ in it.
Wow. So I kind of feel the same way. It's about Brooks, though. And I, by the way, I'm all for you taking your shot at DJ. I mean, it's one of those things that listen, you can believe that maybe these guys don't take, these types of tournaments seriously and that they're tune-ups. I think that might be more true for DJ than Brooks, just because DJ's in lesser form than Brooks is, even though DJ's technically the better player from a ranking standpoint. Brooks is clearly in the better form. Brooks is definitely going to rate out number one in people's models, certainly if they're lost 24 or 36 rounds. With that said, what if the narrative about these two guys is wrong? If to your point, if the narrative that they're just tuning up is wrong, which I kind of think is a little ridiculous to say, like, they're not, because what you're really implying is that they're not going to try. And I understand, like, sometimes, like, we have metrics to bear this out, that they don't dominate the week before majors. But two things there. One is, golf is a very, like, variant sport. Like, you can be the best and finish 25th or 45th or miss the cut. Like, it happens all the time. So it doesn't prove your point that Brooks doesn't take, non-major seriously when he finishes 27th in a tournament. That does not prove your point. Those are not necessarily correlative. So let's just put that away real quick. I mean, if he did have a history of, like, withdrawing after round one because he's just like, I'm bored, or missing the cut every single time because he's like, I'm just tuning up, I'm not going to shoot my normal shot here, that's a little different. But I think Brooks Koepka is playing better golf than almost anybody in the country, or in the world, I should say. And you're getting him really at a discount, to your point. Him and DJ, if they play optimal golf, they are over 4 days, mind you, this assumes they make the cut. They are so far and above better than whether it's Matthew Fitzpatrick or Kevin Kisner or CT Pan as you go down the list, or Sung J M. Like, they're so much better than those guys that over 4 days, if they really were playing optimal golf for them, they clear this field by 5 or 6 strokes. I mean, it's a potential. It's a potential runaway. So it's one of those things, even if you believe in the narrative that they're not taking it super seriously, I feel like you have to have a couple shares no matter what, because let's just like they're coming, the US Open's on the other side of the country, by the way. They're coming over they're flying over, they're prepping just to kind of like mail it in. I mean, I don't see that. And then if you, in Brooks' case, if you add the Bryson Brooks rivalry that Brooks Koepka literally created because he needs that chip on his shoulder. Brooks Koepka needs a motivator, which is probably why that majors thing really came into play for Brooks, because maybe it's true. Maybe he just needed some extra incentive to really focus. Well, now he has it because he's all over social media bashing Bryson, and he knows if he fails, whether it's the US Open or this tournament, that Bryson's probably going to be on social media making fun of him. So now he is sort of he's created this motivational pull to try to kind of dominate, maybe win the FedEx Cup, maybe become the best golfer in the world. And I think it's like prime time to just go ahead and take Brooks. So whether it's DJ or Brooks, I'm all about it. Now, don't get me wrong. Hatton's great. Hatton's fine. I think Matthew Fitzpatrick, I think it's a really good bounce back spot for him. He hasn't been that good on approach, but he's been good everywhere else, particularly off the tee and with the short game. So I think it's kind of a good course for Matthew Fitzpatrick. Same with Hatton. But my two guys here, Joel, and you can kind of respond to what I'm saying here, but I like Brooks Koepka, and my pivot in the elite range is Matt Fitzpatrick, because that's what he wants to be called now. So it's Brooks and Matt for me. It's not that I don't like the other guys. It's just I feel like Brooks and Matt are going to be better on this course this week. And what say you?
So, I do want to touch on what you were saying. I agree with you, and I don't buy I'm going to show up, but I'm not going to try. If you're coming to a tournament, you're going to try to win it. Like, why would you not? No one shows up to a tournament and says, I'm not going to win this one. I'm going to try and lose. That doesn't make any sense. Now, what I will buy into maybe a little bit is that they don't do all the same preparations that they do for other tournaments. Maybe they Brooks was at the fight the other night, this weekend. So maybe that's the type of stuff we might do. And that I can get behind. But when he's there, he's going to be trying to do his lowest score. He's not going there to not try and get his lowest score. So you're going to get their full effort when they're on the course. So that I don't buy, and I do think we're getting such a big difference in talent at this top that I don't think how much preparation can you have on a course that no one's played before. So right. I think I'm not buying they're not going to try. And don't forget, DJ lives in South Carolina, so this is like his home court kind of thing for him. I think he might want to win this tournament, at home and be a little extra special to him. Other than that, I'm completely fine with everyone in this range. DJ's my pick; that's who I'm rolling with. But Tyrrell Hatton, the biggest thing I don't like about him with this week is ownership. It looks like he's going to be the highest owned in this range, which I don't think he's the best golfer. So I think he's a good play. He grades out well through the metrics for this course, but at the highest ownership, I think they're all, I'd rather just kind of pivot to Fitzpatrick, who I like also and is also probably better than most of this field. But like I said in the beginning, my go-to this week is going to be DJ.
Yeah, I totally agree about Hatton. It's going to be kind of strange if he does well because I had been riding him most of the year and now I'm kind of off him. And of course, that's when he's going to be successful, right? But yeah, he's looking at like 25% ownership, highest of these top 4 guys. It's almost like HV3. Like I think HV3 is good for this course, but I'm probably not going to play much of him because he's going to be really popular too. So there's certain instances where if a guy's really popular and I kind of think it's a toss up between, let's say, him and Matt Fitzpatrick, I'll just go with the lower owned guy. So it's one of those things where I play a lot of single entry. I play some cash. I play some 3 max. I don't need to worry about ownership percentage as much because I play those tournaments. But literally, if I like Matt Fitzpatrick and Tyrrell Hatton the same, it literally doesn't make sense for me to take Tyrrell Hatton if I like them the same. And I do this tournament, and I like the spot for Matt Fitzpatrick a lot. So those are my top 2. I think we've done what we can on those top 4. I mean, I think it's pretty clear we both like DJ and Brooks. I don't want to say that's a minority view because people are going to play them, but I definitely think people are hanging on to the narrative. And by the way, DJ's play hasn't been that great lately. So, I mean, it would make sense to be like, listen, I need to see it from DJ. But then he's the best in the world for a reason. Like guys like that can turn it around at a moment's notice, at a tournament's notice. So I totally understand the argument for DJ. I think the reason I have Brooks elevated over him is it sounds ridiculous. Now I'm getting into narrative building, but that Bryson Brooks thing, man, this is like a real thing that, again, Brooks created that, in my opinion, he created it because he needed that extra something. Maybe he didn't realize it, that he was doing it consciously. Maybe it was a subconscious thing, but now it's here. And now it's his time to prove that he's either the best in the world or at the very least better than Bryson. And every tournament matters in that capacity.
So you know what I think about it? I think Brooks created it, but I think Brooks thinks it's fun and funny. I don't think it really bothers him. I think it bothers Bryson. You could tell like Bryson's kicking people out of the tournament. Like it's under his skin. Whereas I think Brooks like gets a kick out of it. He has fun with it, but like I don't think he really like loses sleep over it.
No, I totally agree with you. But nonetheless, he knows if he has a poor showing at any tournament in this moment in time, he's probably going to get some feedback from a Bryson or from Bryson fans or something like a miscut here where it looks like he's efforting, but he just plays really poorly. It's just not going to go well on social media for him, whether it's this week or next week. So I think there is a small piece of motivation that's going to propel him to like, quote, try in this tournament. All right. So we've done that elite range. Let's go to the 9K range. This is not a range I'm in love with. It's not a big range. And I'll just read off the names for those of you that are listening to the podcast and don't have it in front of you. Harris English, Sung J M, Tommy Fleetwood, Ian Poulter, Kazire, and Garrick Higo. Anybody you like here? I'm not a big fan of much.
So we're not going to be able to get too many of these guys in if we're going to stick with our original game plan of going for the top guys. 2 guys I do like here a good amount are Sung Jae. Again, this is a golfer who I think is consistently just above the rest of this field. And Kazire. Now, my issue with Kazire is I love Patton Kazire as like a mid to low 8K golfer that he normally is in these tournaments where you can squeeze him into a lot of your lineups. Now you're paying your premium, but rightfully so. In this field, he deserves to be this price. He's not overpriced. It's just different to see him at the top tier. But the way he's striking the ball, he can compete this week. So if anyone of the of this range that I'm going to get in it, it's those 2 guys.
Yeah, I like that call. I think Sung Jae is a smart, kind of safe-ish call. He obviously can win in this field. I don't love how the form has been really for quite some time. I feel like ever since he got a home and wasn't like living like house to house or hotel to hotel or out of his car or whatever it was last year, I feel like things have changed a little bit. So I don't know, that maybe is just a coincidence. But Sung Jae's fine. I don't know that I'm going to be playing him for most of the reasons that you just said when you started off. I think Fleetwood is interesting, but he's still not really striking the ball well enough for me to choose him over just paying up for like a Terrell Hatton, for example, or a Matt Fitzpatrick. Keziah's interesting. He's a hit or miss guy. It's just one of those things. He can absolutely crush it with the ball striking and the putting, and then he can kind of fall off the map. I think he's a great – there's a handful of guys that I really like for like showdown this week. He's definitely probably going to be one of them. Johnny Vegas is another one of them. Luke List, who I like kind of in both, whether it's 4 rounds or showdown. I like him a little bit more for showdown because I don't think he'll have a hot putter for 4 days, but he certainly could have one for 1 or 2. So we can get kind of like talk about that. I mean, Keith Mitchell's another one of those guys that'll probably be more of a showdown play for me. But let's get to that 8K range. I don't think we need to spend too much time on the 9K range. I will say that Garrick Higo is not popular, but he'll be in that 10% range. And he's really kind of dominated lately out on the European tour. I don't know how that's going to translate here. The good news for him is that typically when we're talking about a European coming over to like a PGA Tour event, typically it's a pretty loaded field. It's at least a good field. And what we have here is kind of like almost like a Corrales type field. So if somebody like that who was dominating in Europe was going to come over and hit big here, top 3, top 5, outright win, that kind of thing, it would be with this field and on this course, which is kind of like a links-ish style European course. So any thoughts on him? Is that somebody you're going to roster?
So he is interesting. He is not making my roster because of the price. If he was 8K, I probably would play a lot of him. But at 9K, I just don't feel like there's an edge. Yes, this is a field that he usually does well in, right? This is similar to a European tour, probably a little better. But again, this is a weaker field that he might be able to do really well. But there's, 5 or 6 guys up in the 9 and plus range that I just prefer over him. So in order for me to make those builds work, I just can't afford another 9K guy in my player pool.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So let's go to the 8K range. And before I kick it to you, I'm going to tell you who I like. As everybody knows, I pick a secret weapon every single week. The secret weapon is a guy that is less than 5% owned, or at least projected to be less than 5% owned as of Wednesday night, as of Stephen Pillardi's article that he puts on WinDailySports.com at around 6 Eastern Standard Time. And not only is he less than 5% owned, but he has to be in the 6K range. In other words, less than 7,000. So it's just one of those like big time leverage plays. Now I'm 36-9 with the secret weapon, which is a pretty staggering record. A lot of those guys have contended in terms of like being there on Sunday afternoon. Most of them don't, but again, 36-9 in terms of making the cut. And a lot of those are like, doing wonders for your team. With that said, Alexander Norn, who's at the top of this 8K range, was my secret weapon last week. And it's just so funny because last week he's 6,800. Nobody owns him. He's in like the 4% or 3% range or whatever it was. He's our secret weapon. So everybody at Win Daily that rostered him, including a guy who won a lot of money, he posted after Sunday evening, and he had the secret weapon in his lineup. Well, he's all of a sudden 8,900. So it's a pretty staggering price. But I do think he rates out well. Both the short and long game for Alex Norn is really pretty good. I totally understand if people want to pivot off of him because he's going to be popular, but I did want to throw him out there. I think he actually has some outright potential here. And I certainly think he has top 10 potential the way he's playing. He seems like a great course fit. If you want to pivot because he looks like he's going to be like 16 to 18% owned, feel free to do that. Another guy that I like that's pretty popular, and he's played on this course, and everybody at this point in the week knows it, Lucas Glover. He's going to be popular. He's going to be over 15% owned. Lucas Glover has been like, forget about the fact that he knows the course, because I don't think that's enough to like launch some guy into 15, 16, 17% status. But Joel, you'll recall, we've been doing these shows and talking about Lucas Glover for a few weeks now. I mean, Lucas Glover has played really, really good golf. And if you do a model, let's say it's the last 24 rounds, Glover's going to be in your top 10. I mean, honestly, you'd be hard pressed to like shift the metrics around last 24 rounds to exclude Glover from your top 10. That's how well he's striking it. So he's going to be popular for a reason. I think he's a great cash game play. Maybe you want to pivot off of him in GPP, or maybe you want to play him and pivot somewhere else. I'll give you 2 more guys that I like before I kick it to you. HV3, I think I like him more for showdown. I hate when HV3 is popular, no matter the price, because when he's popular, he typically lets everybody down. And I think he's really a good course fit here. I don't think I'm going to play a lot of him, but I felt like I had to mention him because I do think he's a good course fit. The last guy who's going to be much less owned is Scott Stallings at 8,000. Scott Stallings, I believe, has made 5 cuts in a row. A couple of those have been top finishes. I think he had a 3rd place finish 3 tournaments ago. He did well at the Zurich. I think him and his partner finished 11th. Stallings is just striking the ball well. I mean, he can miss the cut, yeah, but the approach game has been there. Off the tee game is kind of shaky. Short game is okay. At 8,000, I think Scott Stallings is a pretty good deal. So I think those are the 4 guys I'm kind of keyed on. I will say that I think Snedeker and Jonathan Vegas are fine plays. I think CT Pan is a good leverage play if you want to go there. But in terms of the 4 that or I should say 3, because I'm not going to play much HV3. The 3 that I'm focused on are Lucas Glover, Alexander Noren, and Scott Stallings. Joel, where are you at in the 8K range?
So for this week, in order to make a lot of DJ work and things like that, you got to take some stances. So there's a lot of guys in this range who I actually like, and if you don't want to play that way and you want to be more balanced, I think guys like Noren will make a lot of sense. I think even if you want to take a shot on somebody like Keith Mitchell, I totally get all that. But if you're going to be playing a whole lot of that top range, you got to just sacrifice some of these guys because you won't be able to afford it. So that's where I am. A lot of sacrifices for this range. The guys that will make my rosters that have been like my top picks are Glover. Glover's going to be on some of my rosters. Like you said, Sid, he's playing too good to be fitted in a field like this. In a field like this, he's an all-star, right? He's a guy that belongs in these bigger PGA Tour events. HV3 as well. I like Glover a bit more. I kind of feel very similarly to you do about HV3. When he gets popular, it kind of makes me skittish. He's very volatile. Like HV3 is the type of guy that when he's not popular, he's like a fun, sneaky play because he does have that upside and an unpopular player. But for a guy that like more often than not will not be consistent, to pick him up with a bunch of ownership is scary. So I can definitely see why you'd want to pivot off of him. But I will touch on, I think Jonathan Vegas, he's another one where he grades out really well. The price is a little steep for the type of golfer he is. But again, in this field, he is, in the way he's grading out, he certainly makes sense. But Brandt Snedeker, I like a lot. When people look at him and they run their numbers, that might get turned off a little bit because he's not the longest hitter. And this is supposed to be a really long course. So if that's your narrative that you're playing, I can see him maybe losing some ownership because of that. But he's historically been a B golfer in regular fields who had gotten to a cold streak the last year or two and seems to be coming around. If you look at his last 5 outings, he has a 6th, 42, 11, 17, and 50. So at 8,400, this is a guy, and those fields were stronger than this. So this definite top 10 potential out of Snedeker. And then the rest of this field, I'm pretty much gonna have to waive. I'm with you. I think your take on Stallings is a really good one. I'll probably have a small percent of him in there as well, but again, it's just hard to get all these guys into your lineups.
Yeah, that's solid. I totally agree. No, I like most of those guys that you mentioned. And yeah, you're going to have to make decisions from a lineup construction standpoint. I mean, I know the first few lineups I made were Brooks Koepka, and then I just skipped the 9K range. I went into the mid 8K range, and I was able to grab whether it was a Noren or a Stallings or anywhere in between. I was able to do that, but then that left me in like the low 7-ish range, which is okay because there's some guys in the mid to low 7s and high 6s that you can play. Go ahead, Joel.
Well, what I was going to add to that is once we get below this range, maybe even the bottom of this range, there's not even a big difference from the bottom of the 7s up, right? At that point, most of these guys are interchangeable. So I almost would say like the main reason why I'm fading these guys is because there's guys below in the 7K range I like equally that I just need the salary savings on. So it's just an unfortunate price tag is all it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So for this particular tournament, you don't really want to get yourself stuck on the price, especially once you get to like, I'm really ballparking it, but let's just say like right under Snedeker, for example, like let's say, or maybe right under Jonathan Vegas. Actually, no, right under Snedeker at 8,300. I think you're talking about a lot of the same guys until you get down to like 6,900. And I'm not even like exaggerating the point. I really think the margins between, and the real reason I'm telling people that is because a lot of people make their lineups a certain way, and it's totally understandable. It's just very natural to be like, I want to take this guy. I want to take like Brooks Koepka or DJ or whatever. And I want to take Alexander Noren. And then, okay, I have to take a low-end guy because I need the price savings. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to take, Hammer and Hank Lebioda, who I'll talk about in a little bit. And then, okay, good. I have a little bit more money. And then you just kind of go back and forth. And then you're left with a number. For your last guy, you're left with a number. And let's say it's like 7,700. do not get stuck on that number and feel you have to jam in somebody between like 7,400 and 7,700 because you want to be in that talent class, right? Because the difference between the 7,700 guy and a 7,000 guy, like a Roger Sloan, for example, who could pop at a course like this, is so small. So don't feel like you have to like spend all your money when you're at that point in the process, when you're on your last player, because the pricing just at that point, it doesn't really matter unless you're at a high end guy, unless you left yourself with like 9,700 or 10,200 or something as your last guy. You don't need to worry about prices much.
Yeah, I have guys that are down in the low 7K range that I have graded higher than the high 7K range. So, and that's totally normal for this field because it's such a weak field. Guys had to get price tags, and they're not that big a difference. What are they supposed to do? Right? They have to. You can't just skip over a whole tier. So it just get plugged in, and it's on us to then decipher where that value is.
Exactly. And so speaking of value, so let's go to that 7K range. I'll start with guys that I've sort of highlighted. A couple of these I've put in my initial picks article. Luke List is an interesting one to me. When the salaries came out, and I usually make a team before I do any like legitimate sort of like big time research. And Luke List, I was like, okay, I like how Luke List has been playing. I think he's going to be good for this course, And then I saw his putting numbers after the research, and I knew he was a bad putter. But I mean, it's even in this field, it's really bad. And so that's my caution with Luke List, and I think that's why I might like him more as a showdown play versus like a regular 4-day tournament play. He's not heavily owned. He'll be under 15% most likely, so it's a little chalky, but not like crazy chalk like a Vincent Whaley is going to be. But Luke List I could go either way on Luke List. I would say he's probably more of a GPP play for me. I don't think I would play him because of the putting in cash. It just scares me, and I do think these are going to be fast, undulating, tricky greens. And a guy who's not confident with the putter doesn't really make me confident about my lineup. So that's my dissertation on Luke List. Martin Laird is interesting to me. He didn't really make the cut, but if you have anything to say about him, I'd be interested. Vincent Whaley, I love. I mean, listen, he's made 9 cuts in a row. It's the 4th longest streak on tour, which is staggering when you think about it. The metrics really match up for Vincent Whaley. I mean, he's 25th off the tee last 24 rounds. He's 28th on approach last 24 rounds. He's been top 20 with the putter. He's good around the green. The one maybe watch out for him is that the proximities with the long irons, he really hasn't been super great. But listen, this guy keeps making cuts. Now, he's a great pivot in GPP because he's going to be extremely popular. So I like him almost more as a cash game play because he keeps doing the top 25 thing. But if you want to pivot off of him for GPP, I think that's a smart thing to do. A funny pivot to me is actually Rory Sabatini because even though his metrics don't jump out, I mean, he's got a strong pedigree. And in this field, I feel like Rory Sabatini could step in and be like, I can beat these guys. And he is going to be extremely low owned. So that's somebody to at least think about in maybe a bigger GPP. I'll give you 3 more names, actually 4 more. Ben Martin's been playing really good golf. I think I already have an outright on him at like a ridiculous number. So I like Ben Martin. I don't love Jason Duffner, but I think he's a decent play because he's going to be low owned and he's, kind of a value at 7,200. I think Joseph Bramlett, if Sticks Picks was on this podcast with us, he'll be with us next week, but not this week. But he'd be all over Joseph Bramlett. Bramlett can really pop at times. I think he's a decent kind of home run play. And the last guy I'll leave you with, I already mentioned his name. He'll be extremely low owned, so he's going to be volatile. It could be a miscut, but if he makes the cut, this is a big time leverage play, and he's proven it before earlier in the year. And his name is Roger Sloan. So that's who I like in the 7K range. Joel, what say you about some of the guys you like in the 7K range?
I'm glad you mentioned Ben Martin. So Ben Martin's my heaviest play of the week after DJ.
Wow,
so I went pretty high on Ben Martin. You're right. He's playing great. And what I really like about him is he is like he's a really good player in this field. When there's 20 Rahms, DJs, Thomas, Spieth, it's hard to think that you're going to pick Ben Martin over those guys, right? But when there's 4 of them, right, and then he's the next guy, I really love him, especially like, and we'll talk about this later, but as like a top 20 play and things like that, I think he can be a really interesting play there this week. Now, for the rest of this range, I think you were spot on with Luke List in that he's very volatile. So you're playing your big GPPs. That's where you want to target List. He has a very high upside. He can get you a top 10, a top 5 in this tournament, but he can miss the cut. So you don't want to overexpose yourself to him because, he can hurt you a lot as well. But if you're going to play some of those big GPPs and sprinkle them in there, I think that totally makes sense. A guy you didn't mention was Rafa Cabrera Bello. So he's recently got on my radar over the last couple weeks. For those who follow Showdown and are watching every day, he's really started to heat up very recently. So if you're running models going back months and what have you, or tournaments, he's not going to grade out well. You really have to just kind of be banking on over the last 2 or 3 tournaments. He's been playing really well, and if he still has that magic this week in this field, it's going to be a leverage play. So I like him a lot. Martin Laird is usually a guy that is like a sleeper of mine that I like to get behind, but this week, he didn't grade out well. His price tag isn't really all that affordable for what he is, so he just wasn't really fitting into what I wanted to do. So I'm fading him for the most part. A guy you didn't mention that's definitely on my radar is Sepp Straka. So we know Sepp Straka, he's pretty volatile too. So, be careful with how much your exposure, but he certainly has the upside. I can see him getting a top 15 here this week. If his game is clicking, the distance shouldn't be an issue for him. And at this price tag, I think it's a totally fair price. And what looks like right now to be really low ownership, which I love a lot. And he's a really, really interesting and fun pivot play to Vincent Whaley, who Whaley is your cash play, small tournament. He makes a ton of sense. He's making cuts left and right. He has a lot of power for this course. He just makes a lot of sense. Probably everyone else sees that, and now you get a battle ownership. And if you're playing in a 50,000 person field, that's where you probably might want to try and get different and maybe pivot to someone like a Straka. We went through for Ben Martin. Now 2 guys, and I also see you guys mentioned him in the chat. First, I'll start with Villegas. Vegas is a guy I've been mentioning a lot recently. He's a volatile guy. He's hit or miss, but we've seen him have some really strong finishes recently in some stronger fields. I wouldn't say this is necessarily a course fit that super suits his game, but I just think he's a player that has the potential to be a top 10 here, where especially in GPPs and those bigger tournaments, it can be a differentiator. Now, Seamus Power, I love. I'm a big Seamus Power fan, so I gotta say I might have a little bias. I like him. But the numbers also say he's a good play too. I mean, his recent form is really strong. He's done really well in some recent tournaments, maybe not the strongest fields, but he has tied for 9th at the Byron Nelson. The MG result is I think it's a KFT, so it's a JV field, but another top 10. So just having those strong finishes, playing good golf, a guy that should have no issues with the distance on this course, could be a spot where he could pop this week in this field. And then the most part, that's a majority of the field of this range that I like. I do like Bramlett. I think Bramlett grades out really well on this course. Getting down to the bottom of this range at 7,100 with also a top 10 in his last 2 outings. He's another. All these guys are volatile, right? Because these aren't great golfers. But I think Bramlett with the score and the price, he could be a really interesting play here as well. And the last guy in this range that I just want to touch on as an interesting play, he's not in great form. He's actually missed his last 4 cuts. So you got to roll a bit of the dice here. But it's Eric Van Rooyen. Eric Van Rooyen, we've had him on as guy we would target in regular tournaments before as a value play. If he finds it, he's as talented as a lot of these guys in this field. He's just you're taking a risk because he's not in the best form. So if you want to roll that dice, it could be worth it in maybe a bigger tournament.
Yeah, I think EVR is a smart play. I think we might have been worried yesterday that he might withdraw if he qualified for the U.S. Open. And there's a couple things like some moving parts still going on where we still could see withdrawals. I think I'm not as caught up as I need to be on what's happened today, but definitely monitor the withdrawals because into Wednesday night, on Discord or however you want to do it, because I don't want to say it's likely, but I wouldn't be shocked if we have like 2 or 3 more withdrawals. And the last thing you want is to have that in your lineup Thursday morning. Obviously.
And I would say give yourself a chance on Thursday morning before it starts. Set an alarm 10, 15 minutes before. Make sure you double check if anyone withdrew last second so that if that did happen, you can replace those players and don't just wake up a half hour after tee off and be like, oh, I'm screwed because someone withdrew and I didn't wake up early enough to make any replacements.
Yeah, and just FYI, the tee times, and I'm talking East Coast time here, it's 7 o'clock a.m. is Scott Brown's the first one to go out with Robert Garrigus and Bo Hogue at 7 a.m. Oh, and Jonas Blixt, Barnes and Hostler. So 7 a.m. is the first tee time. So if you are going to do that alarm thing, you definitely probably want to set it at like 6:30, 6:40. It'll give you just enough time, unless you're in like 150 max and you need more time than that. But it'll give you just enough time to scan, your 15 or 20 lineups or 10, however many you do, and get some guys out of there. That's definitely really good advice. I did have something to say about one of your 7K guys. Oh, it was EVR. So it was just, just keep monitoring that. I think Patrick Rogers is another guy that I might have to take a kind of a deeper dive into as well. Probably not James Hahn, but that's a guy I normally like. Probably not on this course. So 6K range, Joel. I don't like much, as you might appreciate with this talent field, but I really like Hank Lebioda. I bet him outright when the lines came out on Monday morning at 150-1. Lebioda ranks, I mean, he's really high on my model, whether you're looking at 24 rounds or 12. I like to kind of like, when I'm modeling, I like to use the 24, and then I like to cross check that with 12. And by the way, I should probably mention this because I'm looking at some notes that I have. Some of the guys, this isn't an exhaustive list, but some of the guys that both checked the box for 24 rounds and checked the box for 12 rounds. I have a few notes here. I just want to mention their names because I'd be remiss if I didn't. Alex Norn, Vincent Whaley, Roger Sloan, Ben Martin, Lebioda, Luke List, Stallings. The disclaimer here is these were guys I already liked. These were guys that already were high on my 24-round model, and guys that I was, because they were high on my 24 model, I knew I was going to check that box. So all those names I just mentioned have been both good short-term and long-term if you want to consider 24 rounds long-term. A lot of people think, 50 rounds is the metric you want to go by. That's 36 rounds maybe. That's not really for me. I like to see 24 rounds and in. So just kind of a note there. Those are guys that, those names I just said, all checked out, both short and long-term. I will say this about Lucas Glover, because he is really popular for good reason. Now, if you look at his 24 rounds, he's going to rate out really well in your model. He's actually 5th in mine. But if you run the 12 rounds, he falls back to 68th, because in the last 12 rounds, the approach game hasn't been there like it was the 12 rounds prior to that. So that doesn't mean he's an awful play. That doesn't mean you need to get off the chalk. He's still a good play. He's still a great course fit, and he should do well here. But just know that his approach game lately hasn't been as good as it was, let's say, 2 to 3 months ago. So it's just something to consider when you're looking at stats. If you look at his last, you can look at this really, and you don't need a model to do this. You can literally go to probably PGAtour.com. I don't use that, but there's plenty of sites to use where you can just look at his last maybe 8 to 12 rounds and just look at the strokes gain metrics. They're not great on approach for Glover the last 12 rounds. So that's just a little side note there. 6K range, Joel. I'll just mention a few guys. I mentioned Hank Lebioda. He rates out really well for me. I think Cam Percy is an interesting play. He hasn't been very good lately, but I think in this field, Cam Percy makes sense. He'll keep it in the fairway. I feel like he's probably in line to make a cut, but zero upside with Cam Percy. John Huh is another guy that's actually been really bad lately, but I think he's a good ball striker. And I just think in this field, he could end up having kind of a turnaround type tournament where it's oh, John Hunt's striking the ball well again. So again, that's more of a hunch than something that's actually based on recent stats. But I wanted to throw that out there because I liked the price there. Robbie Shelton, I think he's, anybody here is going to be hit or miss, but Robbie Shelton has shown some hit the last couple of months. Will Gordon, another guy that's been really bad lately. But Will Gordon pops sometimes. And in this field, I wouldn't shock me at all if Will Gordon, especially in a showdown environment, if Will Gordon popped for your team. And then if you really need to go down to the low 6K range, I do not advise going below 6,900, to be honest with you. But I'm just going to throw out a couple just random names that I think could maybe do well here. Sebastian Kaplan and Jonas Blixt. Jonas Blixt has shown some flashes lately, and I think he's a decent course fit here. Listen, the metrics aren't going to bear out. That's why these guys are in the low 6K range. But if for some reason you're playing a $1.20 max or something, or a $3.20 max, and you want to just, hey, I got to throw a left field guy out there because I want to jam in Matthew Fitzpatrick and Terrell Hatton, or, whatever it is, Sung J M and Dustin Johnson and another, low 9K guy, and you need to dip down here, maybe Jonas Blixt is the play for you, but I would not advise that. So Joel, and first of all, any comments about those guys? Anybody that stuck out to you as well? And if not, who are your 6K guys?
Oh, I had a funny story for you. I was doing that. I was trying to jam in DJ and some of the other guys, and I was trying to find some guys down there, and I kept going back to was Blixt. It was but what happened was I ended up doing a whole bunch of lineups and then looking back and being I have way too much Blixt in my lineups.
That's amazing.
And I tried to scale it way back. I was this is not going to work for me. So I did end up having way too much to begin with, and now I've come way off of him since that happened. But he is someone that I've been looking at already a bunch this week. Now in this range, I agree with you. You want to stay as much in the low sevens as you can. One guy in the low sevens that I think we missed, maybe I thought he was in the 6K range, that I like a lot is Satoshi Kodaira. So Kodaira is a guy who's super affordable. He's coming off a tied for 11th and tied for 13th. So that's 2 top 15 finishes. Grading out stats-wise, it's not going to pop off the page, but it does, grade out pretty well off the tee and on approach. So this is a guy, I'm not going to go crazy on, but I do like him. I probably favorite, under 75, one of my favorite under $7,500 plays. I'm with you. I think my favorite player in the 6K range is Hank Lebioda. Again, a guy who won't have too many issues with the distance here. He actually grades out pretty well on some of these long holes. He's below the 7K range. He's going to be pretty highly owned, which I don't love. But again, we're going to probably this week especially, if you're not eating a little bit of chalk, then you're just pretty much throwing a dart because there's not like these guys are. If the guy is not chalky, he's not coming off good form, so you just have to kind of take a risk on him. So I'm okay with eating a little bit of that chalk there and trying to get different in other places. Another guy you didn't mention that I'll put on your radar. Don't overthink this and play too much of him. If you want to throw him in a lineup or two to have some fun, that's totally fine. It's going to be John Pak. John Pak's a collegiate golfer who's just won the College Player of the Year. He's a really, really good amateur golfer, but there's amateurs and not pros. And, a guy who's just more experienced is a better pick than picking him. But he's the best of the collegiate amateur, so he is capable of stringing together a hot day. I would even say if you want to get different in showdown and taking shots at Pak for him and one hot day, you're better off because there is a high likelihood that he has one blow-up day or something in this tournament and could miss the cut or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up both of those guys. I think Kodaira is a really smart play. It's funny how well he rates out in my model. Like the 24-round model, he's 24th, and then the 12-round model, he's 12th. So actually, no, he's better than that. I think he was like 7th. So he's great. I mean, the long irons do scare me a little bit, but lately they've been a lot better. And by the way, I mean, I'm assuming I know what metrics to look at, but we've never monitored this course. So, I don't want to say take the metrics with a grain of salt, but I'm certainly not as confident about the metrics we need to pay attention to this week versus the Memorial last week or versus the US Open next week. So, kind of keep that in mind. If you need to revert back to, recent form and maybe some more generic statistics, like just general approach instead of like isolating proximities, you might be okay doing that. I'm just trying to hone in on how I think the course is going to play. But Satoshi Kodaira is a great play. And I got to be honest, I meant to mention John Pak. I know other guys in our Win Daily family, Isaiah in particular, he was in our Discord talking about John Pak among other players yesterday. He's a big fan of him. I think there's other guys that are fans of him. So I think that's a pretty smart play. And I think the lack of experience for almost every golfer on this course is probably going to help a guy like Pak because obviously he doesn't have much experience here as well. So I like that play. I think any other 6K guys to mention? Did you just cover the list there?
The one other guy that I didn't mention that I'll put on your radar is Tyler McCumber. Tyler McCumber is a guy who should grade out well here if you want to go by distance. He's one of the longer hitters in the tournament. He actually does pretty well with approach as well. He's not a good putter, so you're going to have to roll the dice on that front. But he does have a top 20 at the Corrales, and he was tied for 33rd at the Honda. So he made 3 of the last 5 cuts, and then at 6,600, that's really affordable, allow you to get some of those top tier guys. So that's another guy maybe to put on your radar down here in the low 6K range. Yeah,
it looks like he's 6,800, and that's a really smart play. What's interesting about McCumber is he's normally, my understanding and my recollection about McCumber is he's normally really good off the tee, but hasn't been lately. And that's sort of like driving his rank down when you kind of, put the numbers into the system. But the good news there is, well, that's his weapon. And unless it's a Matthew Wolff situation where he just loses it for like ever or for a year, then I don't want to say you can count on the off the tee game coming back, but like it wouldn't be surprising if that off the tee game just rebounded real quick because, that's usually where his game is. And his approach over the last 12 rounds, he's 6th in the field. I mean, he's bad with the putter. Okay. He's bad out of the sand, which is going to be potentially a problem on this particular course, but really grades out, really really quite well for somebody in the 6K range. I think that's a really, really smart leverage play in maybe not a single entry, but in, somewhere else. I think that's a really smart play. So I'm glad you brought him up. Did we forget anybody? Is there anybody else that, hey, I forgot to bring him up? This guy rated out super well in my model. And for the record, we did talk about Terrell Haddon. He is number 2 in my model. It's funny that I'm like kind of like ignoring playing him, and I'm going to play Fitzpatrick instead. And Fitzpatrick is 14th in my model. So you'd think, I would just stick with the model. But I just think that Fitzpatrick, to the extent his game is off, it's with that approach. And I think he's going to bounce back there, and everything else checks out. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. Like, I don't necessarily always stick with my model, but I did want to point out it starts with Brooks. Hatton is second. HV3 is third somehow. This is the 24-round model. And then I have Norn and Glover. But again, and then Whaley's right after that. But that changes once you go to the 12 rounds and 36 rounds. So it's really just comes down to what's working for you. I can tell you the last few weeks, I've done pretty well, especially since going to this 24-round model and then cross-checking the 12. So, everybody's different. I know people use 50 as their baseline measurement. And if that works for them, then that's cool with me. But Joel, anything else before we get to our outrights and our first round leaders?
So right before we leave this part, there's 3 guys that end up in my top 20 of my model that we didn't mention. So I'll just throw them out there. They're the bottom. They're close to 20, but it's Josh Teeter, Chris Ventura, and Bo Hoag. So these are all guys that, are volatile. Wouldn't be highly owned, but they graded out well for the metrics that I was prioritizing on this course. So if you're looking for some different guys, I will have some shares of them as well.
Yeah, and of those guys, I'll tell you that Bo Hoag graded out really, really well for me as well. So that is because I can tell you that me and Joel, we build our models differently. I'm pretty positive about that. So the fact that Bo Hoag, who had a really good week last week, by the way, the fact that he checked out for both of our models, which are created much differently, is pretty telling. And it makes me think I need to really deep dive on Hoag and probably include him on some teams. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so Joel, have you looked at any outrights? Do you have any outrights or first round leaders or both?
So how about this? Do you want to go ahead and kick us off on this section today?
Yeah, let's do it. So let me give you some outrights first. I want to say Brooks Koepka at plus 850, but I'll never do that. I'll never, ever, ever, ever recommend somebody that's like 15 to 1 or higher or lower, however you want to, I don't know what the proper thing is to say there. So 15 to 1 and in, I'm not ever going to recommend. I just want to say I do think Brooks Koepka is going to win this tournament. So with that said, I'm only going to give you, let's see, 1, 2, I'm going to give you 3 outrights. And then I'm going to give you 6 first round leaders because those are the more fun things. Scott Stallings at 80 to 1, Ben Martin at 85 to 1, and Hammer and Hank Lebioda at 140 to 1. And as I say that, I know I already put in one additional outright, and I want to see who it is. Oh, I got Alex Norn at 33 to 1. So that's the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend that too. So I got Norn at 33 to 1. I've got Stallings at 80 to 1, Ben Martin at 85, and Hank Lebioda at 140 to 1. Those are my outrights. Joel, do you have any outrights for us?
Yes, I want to give 3 outrights that we're going to have some fun with. These are not, heavy hitters. These are going to be long shots to play with some fun. The first one at 85 to 1 is going to be the second one at 100 to 1 is Seamus Power. And the last play at 85 to 1 is Rafa Cabrera Bello.
So your first, say those again. I heard your second and third one, but your first one you broke up. So what was your first one?
Vincent Whaley at 85 to 1.
Oh, I like that number actually. Okay. And then your second one was what?
Seamus Power at 100 to 1.
Fun. And then you had Rafa Cabrera Bello at
85 to 1 as well.
That one is really smart. I think now that I think about it, I think I'm not playing much of Bello in DFS, and it's mostly because I'm not 100% convinced his game is come around, but also I think he's going to be pretty popular. That's something I can check in a second, but I think in the betting market, 85 to 1 for a guy that's playing that well makes a lot of sense. I feel like his number should be closer to 66 or 60, or even the way he's playing 55 to 1. So I think you're getting a lot of value there. So I'm definitely checking that box as well. Listen, for those of you that are new to golf, this guy Rafa is not some new kid on the block. This guy was I don't want to say he was lights out, but 3-4 years ago, Rafa was really good at golf. And any tournament he was in, you had to kind of at least mention him or give him a long look. And then it just kind of went away. And I don't know enough about his game, right? The state of his game right now. And I haven't even really looked at his metrics this tournament. But I don't know what happened to him over the last couple of years. But it's been a pretty bad look. But as I look at it now, he's good off the tee lately. Approach is great. Putting is very good. Around the green is even better. The longer proximities that I'm focused on, good and bad, nothing terrible. The bogey avoidance is there. The 3-putt avoidance isn't terrible. Yeah, man. That at 85-1, I'm sorry, that's a value. And if you want a top 20 Rafa, I think that, or especially top 40 him, that makes sense. I'd say the same for Hank Lebioda. One of my best bets for the First Cut podcast, which just got posted on Twitter in the middle of this show, and on Instagram. I mean, I usually do like a matchup, like kind of like a simple one that, maybe like a -120 or a +110, but I just said, hell with it. I said this week, just give me Hank Lebioda top 20, because that's all William Hill offered, and that's what they use. Top 20 at +500. I wish I had gotten a top 40 number, because I didn't want to recommend top 20. I much enjoy top 40s because it gives you a much bigger safety net. But yeah, the guys like there's a lot of guys that have value that are down in that 6, 7, 8K range. So when you consider them in the outright market, top 20, top 40, it makes a lot of sense. All right. Have you looked at any first round leaders?
I do. I got a handful.
Okay.
Again, we're swinging for the fences here, right? So no one's taking DJ for first round leader. That makes no sense. Let's go. Let's swing as far as we can. Throw our backs out while we do it. The first one I'm going to go is 150-1 is Chris Ventura. So the thing I love Chris so much is we've seen Chris pop. It hasn't been recently. He's been playing great. But a lot of the metrics that I thought we should prioritize for this course, he graded out pretty well on. So if it clicks for him this week, I think he can get one of those really low days. So that's why I like him as your first-round leader play. I think he's probably due to blow up one of the days, so I don't want to play too much of him tournament long. But for a first-round leader, I think he could be a smart play, especially at 150-1, which is a huge number. And then there's a couple other 100-1 plays I like as well. The first I'm going to go with JJ Spawn at 125-1. So JJ, if you don't remember last tournament, he came out and shot like a 63 in the first round, which was unbelievable. And then he kind of blew up. So we're going back to if he can do back-to-back first round on fires, and hopefully the putter doesn't fall apart until later in the week. The next play I want to kind of throw out there, we're sticking in 100-1. He's 90-1, but it's Eric Van Rooyen. So we mentioned him on the DFS side. He's definitely somebody that can get hot for a day and go really low. So at 90-1, I think you're getting a really good number on him as well. And that'll probably round out my first round plays for this week.
So yeah, Spawn is interesting. Actually, Greg Ducharme brought up Spawn on the DFS show, and I think that's kind of a sneaky play for DFS too. So especially in this field, so I like that play a lot. I like all those plays. So okay, first round leader. Let's go with Lucas Glover at 40-1. And I don't love that one. I don't love the number, but for a guy that is familiar with the course, it does make sense to maybe give him an edge for like the first day, whether it's showdown or first round leader. It doesn't usually bear out because he's up against 150 some other golfers, but it's just something. I mean, 40-1 is a decent enough number. Patton Kizzire at 60-1. I like that. I think this is a guy that can get hot at any moment. He's kind of in that Keith Mitchell ilk, which I don't have as a first-round leader, but same type of guy that can just get really hot at any given moment. So I think those types of guys are good for first-round leader. I have Rafa at 66-1, so I'm glad we're on the same page there. I'm trying to figure out – I have three more. I'm trying to figure out who's going to be the breaking news. All right. I've figured it out. So Ben Martin is 70-1. That's another first-round leader I like. And Joel, I know you agree with that one. I have two more, and this is a big debate for me. I'm not going to do the tie thing like I did last week. So, all right. Scott Stallings is 70-1. He was going to be the breaking news. And for those of you that don't know, the breaking news is my revelation on a Tuesday night as to who is going to be the first round leader, in this case at Congaree on Thursday night. And I was going to say it's going to be Scott Stallings at 70-1, but I've changed my mind because I have come to the realization in these last 30 seconds, Joel and audience, thanks for watching, that the first round leader on Thursday night at the Palmetto Championship at Congaree is going to be at 90-1. And by the way, it's Tuesday night. It's June 8th. It's 9:03 p.m. I'm telling you this like what is it? Basically 48 hours in advance. So you're welcome, by the way. But your first round leader at 90-1 is none other than friend of the show. I just made that up. Soon to be friend of the show because of this call right here. First round leader is Hank Lebioda at 90-1. America, you're welcome. Joel, your response.
You know what's funny? All week I've been spending a lot of time building lineups this week, playing through it, and throughout my head I just kept this replaying thought in my head of Hammer and Hank Lebioda. I'm in. I am so in. Let's go. He's a great value this week. I mean, what I love most, and a lot of kind of the theme of this week is like guys like that. He's just as good as those other guys in the low 8,000 range, and he's way underpriced. And so I think, it's hard for bookmakers to decipher when the tournament's this much different with it being so top heavy. So it makes it difficult where we can easily find these advantages like that one. So I love it.
Yeah. And for the record, if you go the last 12 rounds, Lebioda is like almost number one in this field. I mean, he's pretty good off the tee, great on approach, good with the putter, good around the green, really good at the longer proximities that I personally was focused on, good in sand saves, great in bogey avoidance, not great in three-putt avoidance, but again, you contrast that against the putter, and good drives. He's great there too. So Hank Lebioda is your first-round leader, folks. So Hank, when you watch this clip, because what happens is, Hank, when you I don't know if he goes by Henry or Hank, but I'm pretty sure it's Hank on DFS. It's on DraftKings, so he goes by Hank. So the point is, Hank, when you become first round leader, or if you win outright, because I'm going to have both tickets, 90-1 first round leader. I already have I actually got him at 150-1. It's now 140-1. So people are paying attention to Hank. But when you hit the first round leader and the outright or one of each, you got to come on the show. So this is my message to Mr. Lebioda. You got to come on the show because we put the faith in you that you needed to get to the top. And I just want to say you're welcome for that. Joel, closing thoughts. What did we miss?
Not much. I mean, for the most part this week, I wouldn't make this your heaviest betting, like just cash betting week, because I think there's a lot of volatility in this field and the new courts and all that kind of stuff. But I do think it is a good way for us to handicap the DFS salaries. I think we can find a lot of value and leverage there. So that's where my confidence is in the DFS side. I think, I think there's a price discrepancy. Even as expensive as DJ and Koepka are, they're so much better than everyone else that the only thing hurting us is them withdrawing at the last minute. So hammer them in and let's win some money.
Totally agree. We do have this one question from friend of the show. Are you guys betting the long shots each way or only? So in where I bet, I don't really get the each way option. I'll get like a top 10, top 20, top 40. So maybe that's what you're referring to. But my understanding is some of the books, some of the European books have the outright with a tandem each way option. I don't get those. And Joel, I'm guessing you don't get those either. So I don't know if you have the same answer.
Well, educate me. I actually don't know what you mean by each way.
So each way is in because I don't bet it, maybe he can explain, but essentially you're betting the outright with the option of them being in the top 5 or top 8 or however far the each way goes. So you're basically betting the outright, but you're also doing like a tandem bet where you're getting different odds, obviously, that they're going to finish like in a top 5, top 8, top 10.
So is this essentially multiple bets, or is this you get less odds? So it's multiple bets.
It's multiple bets, right? So
no, I won't do that because listen, if you want to do something like that with like DJ or Koepka, okay, but you're not going to get good number. So I don't think it's worth doing that. And then on the guys, most of these guys in this field are so volatile that I don't love. I like taking the outright or maybe a top 5 because, I think they're going to do well, but they can also miss the cut and then, you're just losing all your money. So I probably won't overexpose myself to too many bets on guys because nobody I have all that much confidence other than, the top tier.
So are you ready? So before I close the show, how about I do this? Let me give you the final scene of A Few Good Men. I need to take a deep breath. But instead of like, I'm not going to act it out because I'm actually kind of like a wannabe actor, but I'm certainly not an actor. I'll do it like hyper speed. I'm going to do just have you seen A Few Good Men?
No.
Oh no. How old are you, Joel?
33.
Okay, so that should be in the it is a little before your time. Joel, I'm telling you, so maybe we'll do this next week because, well, you're not going to see the movie between now and then. Whenever you see the movie, you got to let me know. And then that whole Jack Nicholson, you know that scene where he's like, you can't handle the truth.
I know the scene, yes. Yeah.
So once he says you can't handle the truth, he goes off on this diatribe about how Daniel Alistair Caffey, otherwise known as Tom Cruise, like doesn't understand really how it works in the armed forces and that kind of thing. And it's a cool scene. And Colonel Jessup, otherwise known as Jack Nicholson, he like delivers it. And it so motivated me, that whole movie and the whole dynamic, the courtroom dynamic. I literally started applying to law schools as a result of that movie and got in and practiced law for 14 years before I jumped ship and started doing other things. But I just happen to have it memorized. It's like kind of like a long scene. So you got to watch the movie and then you come back, you tell me you watched the movie, and then I'm going to hyper speed give you everything in that last scene. How about that?
I think that's fair. I got homework to do. I'm down for this.
Nice. It really is a good movie, by the way, on a lot of different levels, acting, message, all of that stuff. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's our show. Joel, any closing thoughts? I mean, we have the U.S. Open next week. I know you want to keep your bankroll down, but because this is kind of like a weird tournament, but where's the edge here in DFS? Is it at the top because people are just ignoring, hey, that Brooks Koepka is kind of underpriced when you think about it, and a DJ is kind of underpriced, or is it at that 7K, upper 7K, lower 7K range where it's like, hey man, everybody thinks these are dart throws, but some of these aren't really dart throws and are actually going to get you your 6 for 6. Like, where's the edge in this tournament if you had to pick one?
I can't get away from the top tier. Me, I haven't seen a breakup down this wide in a long time. I mean, DJ is the most expensive guy at this same price when the field includes Rahm, Spieth, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Hovland, and it doesn't have any of those guys, and he's the same price he would be if it did. So I see a huge discrepancy. I think DJ could have a bad day and still do really well here. So he doesn't even need to be the best version of himself to win. And same with Koepka and same with Hatton and Fitzpatrick to a lower degree. So for me, I'm going to be hammering them in, and then you just got to hit on the lower tier guys. You got to make sure you find those right guys, and if you do, then I think you're going to make some money this week. If
we're right that DJ and Brooks are going to, quote, try to win this tournament, then you're really, to Joel's initial point when we started the show, you are really getting a bargain, because even if day one doesn't go as, quote, planned, because maybe they're 3 shots back of the leader or 5 shots back of the leader, the odds that a DJ and Brooks, who are trying to win the tournament, I'm assuming that to be true, over 4 days aren't going to surpass the random guy who shoots lower than them on day one, and the other random, because it's not going to be the same, the other random guy that shoots lower than them in day two. The odds that over a 4-day sample size, they don't completely crush this field, or at least 95% of this field, are so low if they're trying to win the tournament. So yeah, I'm willing to be out on, however big that island happens to be. I'm happy to be on the island of they're going to try to win this tournament, because they're here and they're so much better. And if they can smell and taste victory because they put a couple good rounds together, they're just going to pour it on. And I don't think there's many people in this tournament that can keep up. So I agree with you, Joel. I think that's where the edge is.
Awesome.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Next week, it's a big show. We're going to have 6 picks with us, and then we're going to be talking the U.S. Open. There's going to be a lot of really cool tournaments, DraftKings, FanDuel-wise, and we're going to have a lot to say both in the betting and the DFS market. So join us then. But for now, we'll leave you. Good luck this weekend, and
sports.